For 42 years, Colonel Muammar Gaddafi ruled Libya through a mix of revolutionary slogans, oil wealth, repression, and a complex web of tribal alliances. By 2011, the Arab Spring that has toppled government in Tunisia and Egypt had reached its doorsteps. The uprising in Libya began with protests in February 2011, which quickly turned into an armed rebellion as Gaddafi's forces cracked down on dissent with live ammunition, mass arrest, and bombardment. However, this led to a brutal uprising that claimed the lives of Colonel Muammar Gaddafi himself, his 3 children, and ultimately toppled his regime. This is the story of the brutal last hours of Muammar Gaddafi. I will cover his escape from Tripoli, his capture in Sirte, the torture and gruesome execution. Welcome to this edition of Hispo Media. My name is Gabriel Adidia. When the winds of protest began across the Arab world from Tunisia in December 2010, Libya was not at the top of most people's list of who is next. However, Gaddafi generally fits the bill as an authoritarian ruler who had ruled for longer than the vast majority of his citizens could remember. He was relatively not viewed as a Western lackey as some Arab leaders who were accused of playing Western interests ahead of their own people. But one thing was certain: Gaddafi had redistributed wealth and undertaken massive social and infrastructural projects in the country, including free education, healthcare, and a massive Great Man-Made River project. However, many accused him of enriching himself and his family from oil revenue. But before we continue with this story, let me invite you to take a moment to like this video and please click on the subscribe button. It is free but will go a long way to help us create more videos for your viewing pleasure. Thank you. In 2011, the Arab Spring protest that started from Tunisia to Egypt and other Arab states was soon at the doorstep of Libya. Sparked by protests in Benghazi on February 15 over the arrest of a human rights lawyer, Fatih Tabel, demonstrators demanded political reforms, justice, and an end to state repression. The regime responded with brutal force, using live ammunition, arbitrary arrest, and later airstrikes on protesters and rebel-held cities. The violence quickly escalated into a civil war between Gaddafi's loyalist forces and a growing opposition backed by defected military units. As civilian casualties mounted, the United Nations authorized a no-fly zone in the country. By March, a NATO-led coalition acting under UN Security Council Resolution 1973 began airstrikes on loyalist forces to protect civilians. Gaddafi's regime lost ground steadily as rebel fighters, loosely united under the National Transitional Council (NTC), captured cities after cities. By late August, Tripoli fell and Gaddafi vanished from the public eye. He became a haunted man he once claimed he would never be. Gaddafi left Tripoli in a small convoy to Sirte with some members of his family, while his son Mutassim followed in another. This would mark the beginning of his flight from the capital and the end of his 42-year-old rule over Libya. In September and October 2011, Gaddafi's loyalists made their last stand in Sirte, his birthplace and a symbol of his tribal base. Sirte became a war zone, under siege, cut off and destroyed by NATO airstrikes and NTC rebel artillery. Inside the city, Gaddafi, his sons Mutassim and Saif al-Islam, who fled elsewhere, and loyal bodyguards dug in. Their walls shrank block by block as NTC fighters advanced street by street. Civilians fled if they could. Those trapped faced bombardments, shortages, and sniper fire. By mid-October, the final loyalists were confined to a few city blocks around District 2 in Sirte. Meanwhile, Human Rights Watch investigators later found extensive evidence of the siege conditions. Food was rationed. Fighters and civilians drank brackish water from irrigation canals. Medical care was almost non-existent. Eds described Gaddafi as defiant yet increasingly isolated, moving between makeshift bunkers and abandoned houses as shelling rained down day and night. Gaddafi's inner circle included his son Mutassim, a senior military commander, Abubakar Yunis Jabir, his defense minister, and loyal fighters drawn mostly from his tribe and protective brigades. Many of these men had fought with Gaddafi for decades. Despite the constant bombardment, rebel fighters encountered fierce resistance in the final weeks, including snipers, mortar fire, and booby traps that slowed their advances. But NATO warplanes maintained constant surveillance. Loyalist vehicles were easy targets on set open roads, so Gaddafi's men hid in ruins, used tunnels, and communicated by runners. By October 19, the final loyalist zone was encircled. Witnesses described the sound of heavy Grad rockets and artillery hammering District 2 hour after hour. With defeat imminent, Gaddafi and about 250 loyalists decided to attempt a breakout on October 28. Before dawn, they formed a convoy of roughly 40 vehicles that included pickup trucks with mounted guns, armored sedans, and civilian cars packed with fighters and senior aides. They carried wounded men, weapons, and what little supplies remained with them. Their aim was to push west along the main coastal road, hoping to slip through gaps in NTC rebels' lines and reach loyalist pockets further inland. Some planned to reach the desert and cross into Niger or Algeria, a route Saif al-Islam would later attempt separately. The convoy, which left under cover of darkness, was quickly spotted by NATO reconnaissance. According to a statement later released by NATO, a US Predator drone and French Mirage fighter jet tracked the convoy as it left Sirte's urban sprawl and moved towards the west. When the convoy reached an area near an irrigation canal and a set of drainage culverts, NATO struck. Missiles and bombs landed on the convoy and destroyed or disabled about 11 vehicles in the column. There was a rage of confusion as the column scattered in many directions. Observers later found charred wrecks and other disgusting images on the scene of the attack. However, there were some survivors, including Gaddafi himself. They scrambled for cover in a desert terrain. Gaddafi and a core group of about 40 loyalists, including his son Mutassim, fled on foot and took refuge in a large concrete drain pipe under the road. The drain pipe was part of the irrigation infrastructure in Sirte. These culverts were about 3 feet high, enough to crouch or crawl through, but barely a fortress. Inside, Gaddafi was injured, bleeding from his head and chest. He was most likely hit by shrapnel during the NATO airstrike on his convoy. Some witnesses described him as wearing khaki uniform, exhausted and muttering prayers. Loyal guards took position outside the entrance of the pipe. Some attempted to lay down, covering fire with rifles and RPGs as advancing NTC rebel fighters, emboldened by the NATO airstrike, closed in. NTC forces moved cautiously at first, fearing booby traps or ambushes. True to their fears, sporadic gunfire erupted shortly after. Later on, dozens of spent cartridge cases and bloodstains was found at the culvert site. Several loyalists died defending the pipe and its occupant Muammar Gaddafi. Others surrendered when it became clear that resistance was hopeless. When the NTC rebel fighters reached the pipe, they found Gaddafi inside, exhausted, dazed, and wounded. Amateur phone video footage, which soon spread globally within hours, showed him being dragged out by a crowd of fighters. He was surrounded, shoved, slapped, and caused earth. Some fighters shouted, "Don't kill him, we need him alive." Others punched and struck him with shoes and whatever they could lay their hands on. The images were chaotic. The desert air was filled with shouts, gunfire, and celebratory shouts. Gaddafi pleaded repeatedly, don't shoot, my sons." His hair was matted with blood. His uniform was also torn. Muammar Gaddafi was also captured alive nearby. Footage showed him less bloody than his father, sipping bottled water, smoking a cigarette, and speaking calmly to fighters. Abubakar Yunus Jabir was captured as well, but was killed soon after. He was likely executed, according to forensic findings. Meanwhile, Human Rights Watch investigation uncovered compelling evidence that Gaddafi was brutally beaten and sodomized with an object, possibly a bayonet or rifle barrel, before being executed. Mobile phone footages showed fighters striking him repeatedly at the back of a truck. Some shouted for his death, others argued for his capture and eventual trial. But in the midst of this chaos, a gunshot sound was heard in close range. Eyewitnesses later told investigators that Gaddafi was shot in the head during this chaos. Later on, autopsy report confirmed the fatal wound was a gunshot to the temple. What do you think about the death of Muammar Gaddafi? Leave your thoughts in the comment section. Muammar Gaddafi's faith was similar to his father. He appeared calm in early footage, but his body was shown hours later with fresh bullet wounds. Investigators concluded that he was summarily executed. Dozens of captured loyalists were shot at the scene. Some bodies lay scattered near the culvert, others were found later dumped nearby. At least 66 bodies were documented at the scene of the encounter. Many had gunshot wounds to the head, with their hands tied behind their backs. This evidence indicated summary executions in violation of international law. Gaddafi's battered corpse was transported to Sirte, a city that had suffered most of the bloodiest fighting during the war. There, local authority placed his body and that of his son Muammar on public display in a cold storage unit at a market. For 4 days, thousands of Libyans filed past, taking photos with cell phones and cheering. The bodies laid on thin mattresses, bloodied and covered in plastic sheets. This spectacle drew international criticism, but was also seen by many Libyans as a final act of triumph over a man they saw as a tyrant. Meanwhile, fearing that his grave might become a shrine for loyalists, anti-rebel leaders buried Gaddafi and Muammar at an undisclosed desert location under heavy security. Few details of his burial site have ever been confirmed. In the weeks after Gaddafi's death, Human Rights Watch researchers visited Sirte. They took photographs of the drainage pipe, the wrecked convoy, and the scattered remains of the final battle. Spent cartridges, bloodstains, and bullet-riddled vehicles marked the scenes of Gaddafi's last stand. Autopsies later confirmed the suspicious nature of his death. For instance, Gaddafi had a fatal gunshot wound to the head, while Muammar showed multiple new gunshot wounds inconsistent with combat injuries. The wounds on other loyalists supported witness claims of mass execution. The transitional Libyan government at the time promised an investigation into the circumstances of the death, but observers found no evidence of meaningful accountability for the extrajudicial killings. Many of the fighters involved came from Sirte, a city that endured a brutal siege by Gaddafi's forces and became a symbol of revolutionary defiance. The fighters, hardened by months of street warfare and heavy casualties, were out to revenge. The NTC had neither the will nor the ability to restrain them. Also, failure to investigate extrajudicial murder suggested the collapse of Libya's transitional justice process. Over the next decade, militias will proliferate, tribal conflict would deepen, and the promise of the revolution would devolve into renewed civil war. Libya became a shadow of its former self. His downfall remains a powerful symbol of the Arab Spring's explosive promise and its violent unfinished business. To many Libyans, Gaddafi's savage death felt like long-delayed justice for decades of repression, torture, and killings. For others, a performing leader has been removed by imperial forces at the orders of the West, particularly America. To human rights defenders, it was an indication that Libya's revolution, like many before it, blurred the lines between justice and revenge. The dream pipe in Sirte, now cracked and buried in sand, stands as a silent witness to the last moment of a man who once called himself the King of Kings of Africa. In the end, the death of Muammar Gaddafi did not bring Libya the peace so many hoped for. Instead, it left behind a power vacuum that more than a decade later is yet to be closed. Click here for the story of the last 24 hours of Samuel Doe of Liberia. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Hispo Media. And I'll see you in the next one. Thank you very much for watching. Peace.